it's Mo. It is August 1st, which is much later than I usually do this video, and that is part of the reason that I'm going to make this a short and sweet and fast mid-year book tag. So it's often called, or always called, the mid-year book freak out tag. I just personally don't jive with that name, so I don't call it that really. And I will leave the creators of this tag link down below, but I don't think they still make videos anymore. I've rearranged some of the questions in this, which I do every year because I think they make more sense this way. So the first question is, how has your reading been going so far this year in 2026? My reading has been going really well. I've read quite a few books. I do this tag up till the end of my June reading, so the first 2 quarters of the year. And in that time, this is the next question, it says, how many books have you read so far this year? I read 102 books. So that's a lot of books, more books than is normal for sure, but it is on par with my reading last year where I read just over 200 books for the entire year, and I'm on course to do that again. I think I've had less DNFs this year, which is weird because I was hoping to DNF more, and I think I haven't had a lot of books. I don't know, I guess my reading has felt good, but it also has felt not rushed, but the year is just going by so fast and the reading is going by so fast, so it does feel like, oh, do I even remember anything that I read? But when I look at my shelves, when I look at my story graph, when I think about books that I've read this year that I love, like then I'm like, yeah, I did really love lots of books this year and had a great reading year. But I guess everything's just going by in such a whirlwind rush, and everything is so fast and stressful and crazy things are happening in the world, so it's hard to like remember your year sometimes. But it's overall, it has been good and I have enjoyed my reading year so far. Question number 3 is, what is your most read genre? And let's see, according to Storygraph, my most read genre is mystery. Yeah, not a surprise there. I have read a lot of mystery books. Mystery is almost always my top read genre. And then Storygraph says literary, poetry, LGBTQIA, classics, thriller, historical, contemporary, short stories, blah, 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 blah. So mystery, that's what I would always say is my most read genre, and it looks like it is again in the beginning of 2026. Next question is, what is the best book that you've read so far this year? And I definitely have to say that the best book that I've read so far this year was Beloved by Toni Morrison. I've read a lot of other books that I really, really loved, but this I think was my favorite book so far this year and also the best book, and I've read this twice, which is going to come up later, and I just really loved it. This is what I'm talking about though when I say like I can't remember the year sometimes, because this book feels so homey and comfortable, and I mean it's a very uncomfortable subject matter and it's a very uncomfortable book, but I immediately felt so comforted and cozy by this book in a weird way that it feels like I read it a long time ago, but actually I only just read it for the first and second time in 2026. But definitely my favorite and the best book that I've read so far this year. Question number 5 is best sequel you've read so far this year. I don't know why I didn't take out my sequels. I've read a bunch of good sequels. I read the second in the Nina Al-Sarafi series. I read the second in the Detective Auntie series. I read the second in Spy Family. I read Incensed by Ed Lin, which is the second in a series. Out of those, which ones are my favorite? Let me look. I read the last in the Will Darling series. That was really good. I read one of the Mrs. Polifax books. I love that. I read The Devil in the Deep Blue Sea, which is part of the Jersey Shore mystery. Oh, I read Through Gates of Garnet and Gold by Shauna McGuire. Reread The Body in the Library, which is the second in the Miss Marple series. I think that was my favorite sequel that I've read. Even though it's a reread, I did really love that book, and I do really love that series, and I definitely think that out of all of the books that I'm seeing, that's my favorite. The Body in the Library, what a great, fantastic book. A great place to start if you've never read Miss Marple or if you've never read Agatha Christie. That's partly why I read it, to be able to tell if that was true, and it absolutely is. The next question, your favorite reread so far this year. So I could certainly say The Body in the Library. I could also say Beloved, because I read this and then immediately reread it. I could say Slaughterhouse-Five, which I reread at the beginning of this year after having not read it for many, many years. I guess this was maybe my favorite because I forgot how fantastic this was. Like, I forgot how amazing Kurt Vonnegut's writing is. I haven't read a Kurt Vonnegut book probably in like 6 or 7 years, and I missed it, and I'm glad to have reread Slaughterhouse-Five, and I do want to do more rereading of Kurt Vonnegut and finish up some of the Kurt Vonneguts that I haven't read before. Biggest disappointment of the year. I'm gonna pick 2 for this. These are not the worst books that I've read this year. I've liked both of these books, but as far as books that I was really, really looking forward to and really thought I was gonna love and then didn't, The Need by Helen Phillips and Mr. Loverman by Bernadine Evaristo were the first 2 that really came to mind. I have had The Need on my want to read list for so long, and then I picked up a copy this year and I read it right away, maybe late last year. This cover I think is fantastic. The concept is amazing, and I thought I was going to love it, but I just didn't love it. I loved parts of it, and I did still enjoy this whole book, but it's a lot more about motherhood than I thought it was going to be, so it wasn't quite for me. And same with Mr. Loverman. I thought this was a really interesting concept about a man who comes out later in life, and I thought I was really going to connect with it, but I didn't. It just wasn't the queer story that I was hoping it would be, and the main character just really didn't fall in love with him, didn't connect with him, and so this was also a disappointing read. But again, I did enjoy this book. I did enjoy both of these books, but disappointing because I thought I was going to love them. Biggest surprise. I think my biggest surprise was The Pilgrim Hawk by Glenn Westcott, because I picked this one up randomly at a used book sale. I never find NYRB books at used book sales that are so hard to come across, so I always pick them up. And I didn't realize that this was a queer classic, and I didn't realize that it was going to be so interesting and observational and beautifully written. I was surprised by it at the book sale. I was surprised that it was a queer classic, which I didn't know. I was surprised that it was so gorgeous. So I think this is my biggest surprise. Second biggest surprise probably goes to Cassandra at the Wedding. I've always wanted to read this book by Dorothy Baker. This is another queer classic and another NYRB book. But I ended up loving this book and feeling like this book was like written for me, and I love it when that happens with the book. Next question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Every month in 2026, I've been trying to read an NYRB book, and in July, spoilers for July, I did not read my NYRB book, so I do want to finish the year strong and read 6 more NYRB books. And then I have also been trying to read a graphic novel every month, so I have read 6 of those, and I would like to continue on and read 6 more at the end of the year. So I also decided to do Her Kid Volume 3, so I want to read all the books that fit into Her Kid, although the way I'm playing Her Kid, all the books that I'm going to read will fit into Her Kid. Really, the graphic novels and the NYRB are like the goals that I want to hit. Question number 10 is new release you haven't read yet but want to. I think I've read most of the new releases unwittingly. Like, I didn't realize that there was going to be a second Detective Auntie. I didn't realize that there was going to be a second Amina Al-Sarafi. Then I know there's, in the next question, some books that are coming out at the second half of the year that I really want to read. So I think I'll continue to find books that have already come out that I want to read, that came out in 2026 that I want to read and haven't yet. But so far, I think I've read them all. So question number 11 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year, and I have said it from the beginning of the year, Emily St. John Mandel's new book, Exit Party. Wait, is it Exit Party? Whatever. Her new book that's coming out is my top anticipated read of 2026, and I can't wait to read that one. I also really want to read the new Richard Osman, a new House Murders book. It's not new in real life, but it's newly translated. Came out in July, and spoiler alerts, I did already read that one. But those are books that I'm anticipating, but by far, Emily St. John Mandel's new one is the one. Question number 12 is favorite new author, debut, or new to me? I did finally read an Eddie S. Glaude for nonfiction. I really loved that book and that author, and I thought I would like his writing, but I do like it. I finally read a Ta-Nehisi Coates nonfiction, and I really enjoyed that. Those are definitely nonfiction authors that I'm like looking forward to reading more of. I read my third Ed Lin. I love Ed Lin. I read my first Chuck Tingle. I really enjoyed that, so I could see Chuck Tingle being a new favorite. There's a lot of old favorites: Dorothy Simpson, Dorothy Gilman, Agatha Christie, Stephen Graham Jones I've read from that I love. Is there a new author that I've read like multiple of that I love? I feel like you have to read several of an author to call them a favorite, and most of the authors that I've read from this year that were spectacular I've already read from and know that they're spectacular, like River Solomon. I'm not sure about that one. I guess I don't really have one that's a new favorite author. There's a lot of books that I definitely want to read more from that author and find out if I love them. Newest fictional crush. I have one this year, and this could be considered maybe a new favorite author because I read Death by the Riverside by J.M. Redman, which is a modern noir set in New Orleans, and our main character, Mickey Knight, is definitely my new fictional crush. She is a lesbian and a private eye, and she stands up for what's right, and she is self-deprecating, but by the end of this book she has come around to understand why she has some of the flaws that she has, which I appreciate in a character and in a person. So Mickey Knight is definitely my fictional crush for 2026. And the next question is newest favorite character, and I don't know, this one I didn't really think about too hard because there were a lot of characters that I really liked, but they're not necessarily new. Like, I definitely love Amina Al-Sarafi. I definitely love Mrs. Polifex. I mean, maybe Setha from Beloved. She is an incredible character and like an incredibly well created character that I did love. Book that made me happy. Again, weirdly, although it is a very hard book, a very tough read, definitely Beloved made me happy. I can see myself rereading this a million times. Cassandra at the Wedding made me happy. Many of the ones that I've mentioned before, Amina Al-Sarafi made me happy. I've read a bunch of books this year that I was like unsure of, and then by the end, by like the sting at the end or the realizations that the reader comes to, even if they're not revolutionary, I really loved, which made me happy. So like Eraser by Percival Everett, which is the first Percival Everett I've read, was like that. And what is this one called? After Dark My Sweet by Jim Thompson was like that. And those really made me happy. Books that like I wasn't loving and then the ending made me love made me happy this year. Books that made me cry. You know, I do a end of the year cry video every year of all the books that made me cry because I do keep track of that on my story graph, but let's just pick a couple. This one says 17 for actually cried. Red at the Bone by Jacqueline Woodson, Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson, Death by the Riverside, which I just mentioned. Death by the Riverside made me cry. So many others made me cry. You'll see a whole video on that at the end of the year. Last question is most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. And I usually go by just the books that I've read because there's so many amazing, beautiful books in my collection, especially because I love vintage books. I love NYRB books. I think they're gorgeous almost always. I did hate this cover. There's something about it that's like very 90s and very intriguing to me. I've already mentioned The Need by Helen Phillips. I really like Five Midnights by Anne de Villa Cardinal. I mean, so many. Definitely one of the most beautiful books that I've read so far this year is Model Home by River Solomon. I think this book is so beautiful, but there's many, many more. So those are all the questions for the mid-year book tag. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I mentioned here. Let me know one answer to one of these questions in the comments below, like what was your best book that you've read so far in 2026, or how is your reading going so far in 2026? 6. I'm not going to tag anyone in this, partly because it's really late, partly because this is a tag that you don't need to be tagged in. Everybody should be doing this tag every year because it's a great way to think about your own reading as well as tell everybody else about your reading. But feel free to consider yourself tagged. You can either answer the questions in the comments below, or you can do a video on this yourself. Let me know if you do. Make sure to tell me. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!